You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast, hosted by Zach Bechtold and Matt Franks. If you'd like to learn more about the Bearded Theologians, you can go online at beardedtheologians.com, where we have past podcasts, blogs, and a couple items for sale. So check us out, beardedtheologians.com. Thank you for listening, and enjoy this week's show.
We are recording in process, the Bearded Theologians podcast, hosted by Matt Franks
and Zach Bechtold.
So this week on the podcast, we're kind of in between conversations and series. We were kind of kicking around some ideas, and we just thought we would dive a little bit into the book of Proverbs. And so we're going to look at Proverbs 1 today. And so, Zach, as you look at Proverbs 1 today, what are some things that come to mind for you?
Well, it's 33 verses long, so I'm not going to read the whole thing. I don't think. No, really, Proverbs is, at least in my world, maybe it's just because of me, I don't feel like it gets enough attention. And so I love sitting down and taking a look. And I made the comment before that I think a lot of times we look at the book of Proverbs as a continuation of Psalms. In some ways it is, but it's not, because it's a completely different writer, even though it's Solomon writing, who is David's son, and we believe that David wrote a ton of the Proverbs. So just kind of a little bit of the context there catches my attention a little bit. But I think my favorite thing out of chapter 1 is starting in verse 20. Wisdom shouts in the street. In the public square, she raises her voice. Above the noisy crowd, she calls out. At the entrance of the city gates, she has her say. I love that early on in this book, Solomon, the writer, whomever, names wisdom her. That wisdom has not only this voice that shouts out and demands attention and demands respect and authority, but that it has the power to do so, and the power in this feminine voice to do so in a time in which feminine voices were not raised up, especially this time, right? And for whatever reason, I love that imagery in naming wisdom feminine, and just the power that it takes for it to shout out, to cry out, to take that authority. And for me in my own life, letting that resonate, because I am surrounded by very wise women who shout into my life all the time, whether I listen or not. That's another thing, right? But it's so powerful. And I love that in not only the context there, but the context in our day-to-day lives. And I think it sets up the whole book of Proverbs well. If it's going to be this wisdom book, and here's the face of wisdom.
So, well, I totally agree with everything you say. And even the women shouting at you are usually because of something you did, not necessarily
100%.
Which is usually like something you probably should do or do better of. I mean, I've played Xbox with you and have heard the conversations that you and Michael have had. Yes. So I know that most of the time it's all your fault. So, you're talking about the verse that you like, the verse that kind of drew attention to me. And this is one that always has kind of stuck with me. And it started with Francis Chan as when he talked about his idea of fear of the Lord. But verse 7, wisdom begins with fear of the Lord, but fools despise wisdom and instruct. I like that verse because the idea of fear isn't the idea of fear of horrific fear. And I say that because I think when you hear fear, a lot of times you go to that like horror movie, scare the crap out of you kind of fear. This kind of fear is, and I love how Francis Chan talks about the respect, and how that this right here is not fear of like being afraid; it's a fear of respect, and that like that idea that wisdom begins with the respect of the Lord. I think about that, and I think about you talked about what you had said about the wisdom being breathed into you. That respect that we have for people when we listen to them and we respect them, we listen to them and we honor them by listening. And I think a lot of our struggles and discontents and a lot of things that we deal with that are can be difficult begin with a lack of listening. And so I definitely believe that like the wisdom definitely begins with the fear of the Lord. And that and then that second line there, but fools despise wisdom and instruct. And I think about with all that we've been through as in our world, um, a lot of the decisions that are usually made by our leadership tends to be people who are not listening to wisdom and the instructions that are giving to them. And so it finds us in a worse place. And if, sometimes if we let go of ourselves and actually listen to wisdom, it'd be amazing to see how much better this world would be. And so like this line for me, verse 7, just to me, it's the heart of what we do, but it's like it's kind of one of those things. It's just fun to play with and to wrestle with.
Right. Well, and it's maybe comforting to know that we've had this problem since the beginning of time, right? In this respecting the things that we've learned, respecting the voices that are in our lives, and listening to the experience and wisdom that comes from our elders, the people around us, whomever who have been through whatever it is we're going through, right? And saying, no, it's okay, just hang on. No, this is how you get through it. And we're like, no, we're going to do it our way. Wisdom continues to say that throughout, that we've been struggling with this literally forever, it seems. Look, I pour out my spirit on you. I reveal my words to you. I invite you, but you reject me. I stretch out my hand to you, but you paid no attention. You ignored all of my advice, and you didn't want me to correct you. That wisdom that we miss, right? And you're right, it's that respect, it's that fear of the Lord, that respect of God, of here's the thing, here's what's going on, I'll hold you close. And we often take that and go, nope, I can do this, I got it, right? I don't need anybody else, I'll figure it out on my own. And we reject that wisdom, we reject those that spirit pouring into us, and go, got it. And I'd like to say that the last 18 months taught us something about that, but it seems as if we're headed, right back into that brick wall head first.
Well, don't you think that a lot of times, and think about like the work that you've done in the church, and think about those times that the struggles that we've had in our churches become when we refuse to listen, either to a wise situation, and if they would have paid attention or done it the right way, how much better things would have been. And think about like those experiences, like you and I have been in churches where, man, if they would have done this right, like if they would have paid attention to the architect and built the wall the way they should have, we wouldn't be having the problems that we are now. And I think that the idea of listening to wisdom, and that's why like the book of Proverbs is so vital to our faith, is that it provides us some wisdom, really, I think, of listening. I think if anything, the book of Proverbs is calling us to listen. Which is something we struggle with. And it's something we've struggled with since the beginning. I mean, if you don't believe me, go back and read the book of Genesis and tell me that if they would have just listened and obeyed and had respect for the Lord, a lot of problems would be solved.
Right. Well, and to say that if they would have just done the thing right, that's often where you and I fall into that trap of, if they would have just done it my way, right? If they would have just listened to me, that's where we have to make that space to listen. And when we do, good, bad, right, or wrong, right? If we make that space to listen and we still fail, or we still bump up against the wall, that's where grace comes in, right? If you go back to Genesis and read these, if they would have just listened, but there's grace all along the way.
Right.
There's grace that moves them forward. There's grace that fills in those gaps. Doesn't make it easier. It's still hard as hell. And we still find that today. Grace doesn't make life easier. It just makes space for us to heal, to listen, to move forward.
But we have to be careful and can't use that as a crutch either,
100%.
saying I don't have to listen because there's going to be grace. And I think,
right.
And I think that falls, that's something that we can fall into fairly quickly, because we're like, oh, I got grace, I don't need to do this. Like, no, like it actually, like, I think grace actually makes you work harder, because you know what the boundaries are and what we should do versus what we shouldn't do.
Right. Well, it brings us back to that respect and the intention of making space to listen, to admit when we didn't, to know that we need people, the Spirit, whomever, and everyone to pour into us, to speak into us, that wisdom that they've experienced and had, so that we then can churn that back out to the people around us.
Well, and I think that that's definitely a good place for us to land today, is where is God calling you to listen? What are some places where you haven't listened? And where are some places you could listen better and discern that and live into that a little bit better, and see where that takes you. And I think that's a good place for us to land today. And so we want to encourage you to go to our website at beardedtheologians.com, check out all of our great content and things that we have up there. We've got some really great interviews, and got some interviews down the pike that's going to be pretty fun. And so encourage you to tune in and listen. We'd like for you to, give us the 5 stars and let people know that we exist by sharing us through your social medias. And so for the Bearded Theologians, I'm Matt Franks.
I'm Zach Bechtold. Thanks for checking us out.
First, guys, I want you to subscribe and like this video and push that thumbs up.
Thank you for listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share on all social media outlets. You can check out old episodes and more information at beardedtheologians.com. Thanks for checking us out. Always does. Always does.